I would like to give a brief introduction of Devrupa ma'am. She is a law graduate from National University of Judicial Sciences, Kolkata. She has been working in the field of banking and finance for some years, and now she is currently working as a journalist with SWADDLE, which is a social media platform, which is a digital media platform, and is working on a very good issues. And I would like to suggest everybody to watch SWADDLE as well. We'll get back to that later. So now I would like Vedant to go with that further.
Hello, ma'am. I welcome you.
Thank you.
So, ma'am, I want to ask one question from you. My very first question. So, when you entered into NUJS, what exactly were the aspirations to do after a law degree?
Um, so when I entered college, I didn't have like very clear aspirations as to what I would like to do after college. I mean, I decided to write CLAT and pursue law as a career while I was writing my 12th board. So there wasn't much time to plan so much in advance. And, until then, not exactly until then, like all my life, like most Indian teenagers, I was primed to believe that the only career options worth exploring were engineering and medicine. But when I was able to sort of break out of that conditioning, I think that would be towards the end of 11th grade. The first career choice that occurred to me was journalism. Uh, However, fortunately, in a way, very quickly I was discouraged by one of my favorite teachers in school. She told me that I was too introverted and too fragile to be a reporter. And I'm not saying this is good advice, it wasn't at all. But in hindsight, I don't regret listening to her because if I hadn't, then I wouldn't have pursued law. And to be very honest, I don't regret pursuing law, like even for a moment, even though I have stopped. I don't regret studying law, even though I have stopped practicing it. But unfortunately, after I got into law school, I sort of joined the whole law firm rat race sometime in my third year, I think. And I think there were a lot of reasons behind that. Firstly, all everyone around me could talk about were law firms. And secondly, like I mentioned, I come from a small town. My family isn't particularly advantaged economically. I mean, at least in comparison to most of my peers from law school. And at that point, I found the pay that law firms offered to be really attractive, and it seemed like a great way to buy myself the kind of rich metropolitan lifestyle that I had always aspired for. Um, to be honest, working at a law firm and getting that kind of salary did get me all of these things, but unfortunately, it took a very, very heavy toll on my mental health, which no amount of money can ever truly make up for.
Ma'am, can you please elaborate further on how it took a toll on your mental health?
Um, I think, law firms are spaces where they're just really toxic environments, okay? Like, nobody cares about your mental health, nobody cares about your physical health, nobody cares about your personal boundaries. And in a place like that, like, how do you retain, like, how do you stay healthy mentally? When you're working like 24/7, you're expected to work till like 2 a.m., 4 a.m., and go back to office at 9 a.m. It's difficult, and it takes a toll on your mental health, on your physical health, which means that your mental health will automatically deteriorate. And I think, yeah, and nobody respects the fact that you're going through troubles. Like, my immunity went down drastically. um, I developed like severe digestive issues, but nobody cared. And in a place like that, it's very difficult to survive for a long time. But people who've managed to, like, it's amazing, but I absolutely can't. Also, to be very honest, if you ask most people working at law firms, if you talk to most people working at law firms, they'll always say that, yeah, I'm planning to quit, I'm planning to pursue an LLM, or I'm applying to other places. Like, nobody at any point in time is like, oh, I want to stay here and like just live here for the rest of my life. So, yeah, law firms are just horrible places. I'm sorry for discouraging you. That's
Thank
your
you for
stand.
answering my question. I'm so sorry that I asked such question from you to remind of your traumatic events.
It's fine. It's important that people know also. And I would like to add one thing. Like, when you the moment you step out of law school, like, don't expect to know what the next 5 years of your life will look like. And to some extent, don't even expect to know what the end of that year will look like, because the idea we have of professional life is very different from actually experiencing it. Like, even if you do all your research, like, knowing and experiencing is very different. And it's important to allow yourself to sort of many changes will happen. It's important to allow your mindset to go through the changes that those experiences will inspire. Don't be like, okay, I chose to work in a law firm, so I'll forever have to do this. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, due to socioeconomic constraints, they have to. To some extent, that is why I also stayed at law firms for as long as I did. But to whatever extent it doesn't work out, allow yourself to get away and explore other things. You have
Thank you
one
so
life.
Thank you for providing me such a great knowledge. Actually, I was interested in the corporate field only, but I will look into it.
See, if you're interested, I would say experience it. Don't just go by my experiences. What if you end up liking it? Or what if you are in a place that is genuinely inclusive and understanding? My experience primarily is about tier one law firms, right? So maybe there are places or there are teams that, I mean, I have no hope from law firms, to be very honest, but might just work out for you. Just allow just keep an open mind about the world and about yourself. And I think that's all I would say.
Thank you, ma'am. Over to you, Priya.
Ma'am, it has been really an eye opener when it comes to corporate law firms. But, ma'am, do you think that it can get better with time? Do you think that while capitalism exists, but do you
Hmm.
think that it is going to get better or is it going to get worse with time?
With respect to law firms or in general?
Ma'am, corporate law firms.
I honestly don't know. Like, see, I don't see much hope, but I was recently speaking to a friend who is still at a law firm, and she was telling me that some changes have started happening. Like, people have started recognizing that problems exist, but I think they are still pushing the blame on everybody else, right? Like, a senior associate is like, oh, but it's not my fault. Like, the partner is asking me to do this, so then what do I do? And I know that it's difficult for an associate to inspire change. I know, because they have a lot of economic constraints. But we can't play this blame game. Like, if you have suffered because of being in this system, you can't perpetrate that suffering further. You should not. Like, when you are in a position of power, you should start making that change. So maybe when our generation, which seems to be relatively more woke or relatively more aware of their boundaries, like when this generation of people goes into law firms, maybe they'll protest more. Maybe they'll, as they rise up, they'll inspire change. I honestly don't know. Right now, the problem is, even if one associate quits because it's difficult, like I quit, there's not really that much of a problem, because they'll find somebody else who's vying for that position because it offers so much money. And they don't really care if people are burnt out, because if people get burnt out, they leave and they find somebody else who's not burnt out and will produce more work. And at the end of the day, you can only make like so many people partners, right? Like, not everybody can go on to become partners. So people keep going out of the system and it works for them. So, I mean, I don't know. My only hope is maybe when newer generations of people who are more aware of their boundaries and their rights become a part of these systems, maybe then things can change.
So, ma'am, I would like to mention here a personal experience where
Hmm.
I was talking about unpaid internships, like how unpaid internships work. So, the
Hmm.
person under whom I was doing internship said to me that, do you know how much these litigating firms pay to you once you enter into a litigating firm, or once you are actually interning into under a lawyer? Do you know how much
Hmm.
they pay just 20,000. So you should not be even asking for that money. So this whole environment of that at upper level, the lawyers are not paying the person whom they are
Hmm.
employing. So how can you expect us to pay in an internship? So do you think this whole, the law firms, this whole, the things that are going on in the law firms or under lawyers should change? People should, they should recognize human rights and pay them more.
Definitely, this internship problem that you just mentioned. So when I was talking about people who don't have great socioeconomic privilege in law schools, so they find it difficult to pursue a lot of internships because, let's say, they have no relatives or anybody staying in these big cities. And big cities are where like most of these law firms are and most of these lawyers are. And what do they do for accommodation? That costs so much money, and there are so many factors that they have to keep in mind, right? So it actually impacts people's careers, like, and of course, like, there's no respect for a human being's time because you're not paying them at all. And I think that's a problem across industries. I'm sure that there are other industries also which don't pay interns enough, and that's just an overall change that needs to happen, even in terms of paying lawyers. Like, law firms make a lot of money, and um, you know, compared to that, yeah, sure, like a law firm salary, a tier one law firm salary might seem very lucrative. But the amount of damage it does to your health, like, I don't think it compensates for that at all. So, yeah, it's capitalism at the end of the day, where people at the top are just making a lot of profit, and people at the bottom aren't really getting paid anywhere close to what they should be getting paid for the amount of time they are investing in the law firm. So it's a change that needs to happen overall. And of course, they need to pay interns also because, I mean, the non-payment makes it really difficult for a lot of people to do these internships. And the fewer internships you do, the fewer internships on your CV, and then it makes it more difficult for you to get a job. And then you don't get a good job, and it doesn't pay as well. And it's just it keeps perpetuating. And
Ma'am, you also mentioned about sexism in law firms. So,
hmm.
did this make you join Swaddle in a particular? Because we have seen Swaddle talking about patriarchy, challenging patriarchy in a very strong manner. So, is it related? Do you, how do you think your personal experiences have led you to get into a digital media platform like Swaddle?
Um, so I didn't decide that I'll work at the Swaddle because it'll be completely different from what law firms were. I was looking to write because I had always loved writing. Like, even like after I had quit doing banking and finance, and like, so after the first 6 months in a law firm, I stopped doing banking and finance because I burnt out and I was medically advised to not do such a stressful job. And then I started doing a research role, and then I tried doing a business development role, which is mostly like marketing for a law firm. And I realized that it's not just that the legal work in law firms that is so difficult and so time consuming, and where they don't respect your health. It's, even if your hours are relatively better, law firms still remain extremely toxic places who don't respect you at all. Like, I was once told that they hired me because they saw I was an unmarried person, and therefore I would have no problem like staying till 2 a.m. and doing work for which I had specifically spoken. I was like, will this have like a specific out time? And they had said yes. And then that was their expectation, which they were obviously not clear about. And they said, and the exact words that was used was, we profiled you because you were like a single woman who would have nothing else to do besides work, and therefore, like, that is a very sexist statement to make. Like, just because I don't have a family to care for and cook for, and I don't know, a child to bring up or whatever, doesn't that doesn't mean that I'll just be enslaved to this, like, throughout, like, for the rest of my day, even though you're only paying me for very specific hours. So that kind of system exists there, and I was just not liking it because, firstly, I think it's a thing that autistic people or many neurodivergent people experience, that when they are not interested in the work that they are doing, it becomes really, really difficult to keep at it. So, after I quit law completely, I figured that I just had to write. Like, I couldn't think of anything else. I tried different things. Like, I mean, I tried doing poetry, like I went to poetry competitions, etc. And I still do that. That was not as a career, but I was just exploring like who I was. And I realized that writing in whatever form gives me the most joy. And I tried to apply to, places where they write about issues that I also care about, and the Swaddle seems to be one such place. But to be very honest, I didn't know that the environment at the Swaddle would actually be this inclusive, because I'm aware that a lot of places that pretend to be super woke on social media probably don't have that in their internal practices and policies. So that's just something that I learned after joining the Swaddle, and that was a very pleasant surprise. But yes, when you experience sexism and ableism at such close quarters, of course, it angers you more. And for me, the way I process that anger is to talk about it, and my way of communicating is through writing. So I think in a way it just worked out, and the fact that Swaddle is a great place to work was just an added bonus.
It's glad that you have found your personal area where you can actually put your thoughts on a platform like Swaddle, ma'am.
I'm really happy to. I think I'm really fortunate that it worked out, and yeah, I'm just lucky. I I don't know what else to say.
We are glad to hear that, ma'am.
I'll tell you why. Like when you put out work that's so close to who you are that it almost seems like it contains a piece of your soul. In my experience, that work product often ends up resonating with people more. And I think that has consistently inspired me to explore things that I care about the most. And more often than not, for me, it's mental health. And what I love about my job is that I get to write about these topics that I care so deeply about. And the Swaddle has always allowed and maybe even encouraged me to explore these themes. And the work environment is, of course, extremely inclusive there. And that's important because when you are not put in an atmosphere where you're constantly discriminated against, you just function better. Like when diversity is recognized, you function better because it's diversity is beautiful. And if I had to sum up the answer to this question briefly, I would just say that how people often make these journeys of self discovery by traveling around the world. In a way, my job allows me to do that from my room. That's how personal my professional life feels to me. And I think that itself is like a big inspiration.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So good to hear this from you. Over to you, Priya.
Ma'am, my question would be, has a legal background helped you in the field of journalism? Like, do you also act as a legal advisor for Swaddle, or are you more cautious about, like, a defamation could be filed for this particular story if I get this out? So, are you a bit more cautious, or do you give legal advice to Swaddle as well?
No. So I am not engaged by the Swaddle in a legal capacity at all. I am just a writer there. But I think knowledge of the legal background just helps. It's not just in my job. Like the world we live in is, I mean, it just helps me in every way, so to speak. Not just with respect to my job. And I think, to be honest, a legal background prepares us for a diverse range of things, right? And with respect to journalism, I would say the critical thinking that law school encouraged, or the lessons in professional ethics that I picked up while studying law, and even the extensive research skills that I developed while in law school and during internships, etc. They are things that come in really handy in my career right now. Um, and it's not just the degree itself. I mean, law schools, while they are very non-inclusive and extremely elitist spaces, to be honest, but it was also the place where I learned to think independently for the first time. I was exposed to ideas that were so new to me that I never thought that I would sort of start embodying these ideas someday. And it's not to say that my time in law school was very positive. um, I think so. I'm autistic, and I think for an autistic person like me to truly thrive, in an atmosphere like college was, is even possible. But my law school experience did open my eyes to a lot of things, and it was instrumental in making me the person that I am today, both professionally and personally. And it sort of laid the groundwork for that. And I think that's what a legal degree at the end of the day is supposed to do, right? Like those 5 years, they were nothing short of like holistically revolutionary for me. I'm sorry for using like such jargon suddenly, but I mean, but also to clarify, I am not glorifying the struggles that happened in law school. They were independent of the lessons I imbibed. They are not the same thing. I would never glorify struggles as a part of learning. But law school experience separated from that was also very important. I think it prepared me for the world in a lot of ways.
Ma'am, here you have made a very interesting comment that law schools are not inclusive.
Hmm.
So, like, this argument has been made a lot that national law universities are not inclusive, their fees are so high. So, would you like to comment that how can we make these law schools more inclusive?
Look, the fees is just one part of the problem. There are just so many. So I'm actually currently working on a feature on this topic, which I'm guessing should be out sometime next week. But when I spoke to people, I was speaking to people from different marginalized communities actually, and a lot of the experiences that they shared were just for instance, somebody who came, a woman of the DBA community that I was speaking to, she mentioned that even though, there's nothing to suggest that she had a reserved rank, but when you go to law school, like the very first day, everybody starts asking your ranks, right? And when they realize that, oh, okay, your rank is this, and it's not like so and so, so you must have come from a reserved category, and everybody looks down on them. And I mean, there are many similar instances. Like I come from a small town, so one thing I always felt was when there were interviews for these clubs happening, like the debating society or say the cult com. I noticed that people from metropolitan cities, for instance, would always have a better chance because there would always be somebody from their school who was there, or they would form bonds based on like the metro city they come from. Whereas I was from a smaller town and there was barely anybody from my town there, and that was difficult. And you're constantly judged, right? Like you're judged on your ability to speak in English. You have teachers make really insensitive remarks, which does absolutely nothing to, when we grow up in a society that has its own views and has its own problems, when we go into law school, to some extent, the college is supposed to allow us to form our own opinions, right? To think independently, to break out of those and form our own opinions based on what we see in front of us. But if these places are so non-inclusive and have their own biases, then how is one supposed to break out of these views? And it's just it's non-inclusive in a lot of ways. The tuition fees, of course, being a huge problem, because of which a lot of people can't make it to law school. English language being like compulsory in CLAT being another problem. So it's just riddled with many problems. I don't know what solutions to offer, but I think it's time that the CLAT consortium or somebody just like sort of comes together and figures out a way to do something beyond offering people reservations, to maybe sensitize faculty members, or do something so that law schools aren't as difficult for students as they are.
Ma'am, I just have one more follow-up question. You mentioned
Hmm.
the use of English language in CLAT, which is a very important question, and I
Hmm.
believe that our whole law curriculum is based on English language. So if English
Hmm.
language is not part of CLAT, so the problem arises there too. But I completely agree we should have different languages as well. So how
Hmm.
to cope up with this difference where we are having law curriculums or our higher courts working in English language?
So, I mean, the Constitution sort of mandates the usage of English in the Supreme Court and the High Court to some extent. So, I don't know to what extent we can completely exclude English from CLAT. I don't know if that's possible, but we need to figure out a way to ensure that um, people from non-English medium schools can also make it, because at the end of the day, when a person becomes like a lawyer or a judge, like their decisions impact the country as a whole, and not just like the elite English speaking population. And I mean, I think one thing that I found interesting was NUJs started this English course for first year students, like for their very first semester, so that it really helps people who don't come from an English medium background to cope in law school, to study these subjects better. And I think that can work out to a great extent, right? Because they are being taught the subject for the purpose of their legal education. So I think I mean, to be very honest, it wasn't there when I joined law school. It started for like later batches. So I don't know how effective the course was or what its content was. But I think small initiatives like this can really help. And I mean, changes can be affected, right? Like, I think Justice Chandrachud gave a speech once on how the CLAT is not disability friendly, and how it has questions on like spatial understanding, etc., which, let's say, a visually challenged person might not be able to answer. And the CLAT did take his comments into account, and they are trying to remove that. And I think it'll come into effect in a couple of years. So I think when people in powerful positions actually speak about these things, the CLAD consortium actually figures out a way to deal with it. Because, I mean, I can suggest five solutions, but those solutions might actually not be workable, right? So people in these positions are also supposed to figure out how to make it more inclusive. Like if I suggest something, and then like 10 procedural difficulties come out in executing that, then that's not really a solution. So the solution has to come from these quarters also. And for that, they have to understand the problems that exist in law school, and like, just what its ramifications are in general.
I completely agree with you, ma'am. Vedant, next question.
As we are talking about CLAT, I want to ask one more question. Ma'am, do you know about the recent change in the pattern of the CLAT exam?
No, I don't.
Ma'am, they have changed the pattern completely and now the paper is comprehensive. In each,
Entirely.
yes, ma'am, in GK also paragraphs are coming. So, ma'am, the students that are from non-English background face a lot of difficulty.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what I've been saying, right? Like there has to be a way to like reduce the reliance on English at the entry level, I feel. Again, I'm not an expert on the subject, so I don't know to what extent it can be reduced, but I definitely think it should be to some extent, because right now it's just discriminatory. It's like this gatekeeping that is happening, and it's unfair. Like I said, like laws affect everybody in the country. So why should a person who doesn't come from a non-English speaking background not be allowed to be a part of the laws that will at the end of the day affect them? Like at present, like I don't think our law recognizes intersectionality at all. And again, another judgment recently mentioned how important it is to understand intersectionality for judges, especially. And I think the judgment also says that maybe something should be done to, teach students in law schools about intersectionality. But I think courses already exist. But the underrepresentation of marginalized students in law schools, or not enough teachers being aware of intersectionality or being sensitized to intersectionality, leads to a lot of these problems. So I think like a proper overhaul is required by, and like, let's say, policy think tanks sort of coming together and making these changes, because law is extremely important. Like it has a big role in like running the country to a great extent, right? And that part of society like can't be so non-inclusive, because then the ramifications are huge. Marginalized communities continue to stay marginalized because the legislators don't recognize their issues. So yeah, I mean, the comprehension thing is a huge problem. It's just sort of worsening the existing problem, I feel, with English being compulsory.
Currently, one more news article is the need of the hour to make consortium understand that they are going wrong.
Perhaps I'm working on it. Let's
Great.
hope it changes
That.
minds. I have no hope, but
So, any advice for the law students like me that are interested in the field of journalism?
um, see, to be very honest, my career path is not it's not been very conventional, right? Like it wasn't very planned. Like I didn't decide that I'll work at a law firm for 2 years and then I'll do this and then I'll proceed like this. It just so happened. But I can tell you my experience if that's helpful in any way. So while I was doing like the research role at the law firm, I started writing because I had always enjoyed it and I started doing it as an escape thing where I started pitching article ideas. And I think the first place I wrote for was this another digital media platform called Array. So I pitched an idea to them and they liked it. And then whatever, I kept freelancing over time with different places. I wrote for Array, I wrote for Gacy, I wrote for Livewire. And that process also helped me realize whether or not I like writing professionally because uh, writing like in your journal for instance, which I used to do earlier, is very different from writing professionally, right? Because you write something and there are a lot of there's edits, etc. And it's difficult sometimes, like you're very close to something that you have written and then somebody tells you that, oh, you have to remove this portion, and you're like, no, but I really wanted to put this out. And it can be difficult to accept that kind of criticism, and it will be a part of journalism always. So I think like just sort of freelancing once in a while can also help you figure out if that's something you genuinely want to do. And also, again, just like law sort of arms provides us with a very diverse range of options, uh, journalism itself is very diverse also. Like I'm in print journalism, but in this digital multimedia age, there are just like so many forms to explore. So I think what you have to do is like keep an open mind and try things out, see what works out for you before you decide to take a plunge. And to be very honest, at no point in life should you be like, okay, this is the thing I'm going to do till the day I die, because you will have different experiences with everything, and you can decide to change your career option. It is one life that you have, so it's perfectly fine to change your career as many times as you want to, as long as you are happy at the end of the day. Because we try we try to think that, oh, one day we'll rise to this level and then this will happen and that will happen, and all of these are very like externally imposed ideas that exist, that by so and so age you have to be at such and such place. But and that doesn't take into account what truly makes you happy. So explore different things, try it out, see if you like it. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
I hope it was helpful for you.
Yes, ma'am, it was very helpful for me. And also, it would be helpful for the viewers.
I hope so.